All right, welcome back again. In this video, we will be discussing resolutions, formatting resolutions, how they're killed, and kind of the process for them either getting passed or failed. So I'm first going to start with how to write a resolution and how to properly format it. So right here, you'll see the proper format of an ASUM resolution. And I'll just go through a little bit, and then I'm going to shift to a Word document to show something that you can't really show in Box, unfortunately. So we'll start with this. And here you can see the heading of the resolution. It has a couple different things that you should pay attention to. So the first is the associated students at the University of Montana, obviously. And then you have the resolution name. So it always starts with resolution and then a verb and then the issue. So it could be resolution regarding program prioritization efforts at the University of Montana, or resolution encouraging the University of Montana to meet the carbon neutral goal of 2035, or resolution amending the ASUM bylaws section 5, article 5, section 2, or something like that. So you always need the word resolution and then the action that the resolution is taking on the issue at hand. And that's the way that you kind of name resolutions. One important thing to note about the resolution name is if you're amending governing documents or it's anything super specific to cite, it might be a good idea to include that name in the resolution. So if you're amending bylaws, it would probably be a good idea to include the article in the section so that when people are going back and researching past Senate's decisions, they can see this is when they amended Article 5, Section 2 of the ASUM bylaws, and that way it gives them an easier way to research historical precedents that was on ASUM. So there's that, and then the next line, you have month, day, and year, and the way that you spell that out is you do the name of the month. So it's not any numbers, no slashes, it's just month, day, year. So you go, I can show you this right now. You go, let's say, and this is the date that you wrote the resolution on. And let's say you can go January 23rd, 2020. So this would be the date that you wrote the resolution on. And then you make sure that the date has to be formatted like that all the time. And then you propose it, and then it gets sent to committee. This is just an easier way to kind of know what people were thinking or when they were writing the resolution. The next is the Senate bill number, and this is something that you don't have to pay attention to because this will be taken care of by the secretary. Just make sure that you keep this format the same. And then obviously I'm giving you this lecture during the 2020 and 2021 ASUM Senate. Make sure that that your resolution template is amended for the correct academic year. Typically your vice president will do that, but in case it's off, just make sure that you're using the correct end year on the Senate bill number. And then you have the authored by and sponsored by lines. So there's a couple important things to know about this. The first is that you always do name and title. And the title is usually always like ASUM Senator, student at large, student, ASUM President, Vice President, Business Manager, those types of titles. So you go name, comma, title, colon, or a semicolon. And you do that for the authored and sponsored by lines. A couple important things to note. If there's a student or a student at large that's writing a resolution, a member of the ASUM Senate besides the secretary has to sponsor the bill so that it can be seen on the floor. If it's not sponsored by an ASUM senator or an exec, then it cannot be debated on the floor until a senator or an exec introduces it into new business or forwards it in the report while they are sponsoring the resolution. The second thing to keep in mind is that if there are no sponsors of the resolution, then you can delete the sponsor line. That's just, again, another formatting thing. If there's no sponsors, then there's really no point in having that line there. Obviously, there's always going to be an author, so you'll always keep that line in the resolution. So that's everything that you need to know about the heading and formatting the heading. And the next is just kind of the body and the signature lines of the resolution. So you'll see down here that you have whereas clauses right here. And a couple important things to note about formatting for whereas clauses. The first word after whereas must be capitalized. And it's just the first letter in the first word. And then everything else is as normal as it can be. So make sure that you're continuing to do that. That's one of the things that's forgotten the most. And then the other thing that's kind of forgotten the most is that there's a semicolon after every single whereas clause. So those are the two most important things to forget, and it's pretty easy to forget. So make sure you put those in there, and it's a lot smoother to debate on the Senate and in committee. To know, so if you don't know anything about the whereas clauses of the resolution, that's totally okay. The whereas clauses are meant to just kind of describe the issue at hand. So kind of what you're thinking about when you're writing the resolution and kind of why you're proposing this. So like the situation that led up to carbon neutrality, or the goal of getting to carbon neutral by 2035, or let's say amending committee bylaws to add another member. You can kind of include the historical precedents. You can include the reasons, or you should include the reasons of why this decision is being made. Everything that's explanatory really should be in the whereas clauses. There should really be no explanatory stuff in the therefore clauses, just actionable items. And that leads me to describing the therefore clauses. And you can see the first one, therefore let it be resolved. So that's how the first therefore clause always starts. The first letter of every single word in this is always capitalized no matter what happens. And then you put a comma between after therefore and a comma after resolved. And then just like the whereas clauses, you put the first letter of the first word after resolved is always capitalized, and then everything is the same after that. So you always start with this. And then once you're done writing the therefore clause, you put a semicolon at the end to signify the end of that therefore clause, unless it's the last therefore clause, which I'll get to in a little bit when I go down to this line. So, and then if you do more than one therefore clause, you can't just continue to say therefore let it be resolved. You have to say let it be further resolved. And so that's why you see this here. You follow the same format. The only thing that you change is you have the word further. And then when you do the last one, this is actually not correct right now, but you still include the therefore let it be further resolved. And it's still the same. Now, typically the final line or final therefore clause in a resolution is who to send the resolution to. And I can actually, let me see if I can pull one up for you. I'll pull a resolution up for you just to give you an example of who the resolution would be sent to. So let's say, man, I'm having a tough time. We'll do my previous president's emergency grant resolution, so you can see, and we'll go over line numbers in a little bit, but you can see how the send to line, there's different people on the send to line that it can be sent to, and it works the same way as it does for authors, as listing authors and sponsors. You do the name, comma, title, semicolon. And then the last person that you send it to, once that person is named and their title is named, you put a period at the end. Now, if you have a resolution that you don't send to anybody, the last therefore clause ends in a period. So that's the important thing to remember. Now, the important thing to note about therefore clauses is that these should really only be actionable clauses. So there really shouldn't be much explanation being given. And this is a perfect example of a good therefore clause that has actionable actions in there. It's a little bit redundant there, but you can see, therefore let it be resolved that in the interest of student success and well-being, ASUM supports the creation of an emergency grant program at UM. You see there's a little explanation there, but the actionable clause is ASUM supports the creation of an emergency grant program at the University of Montana. So there's that. Just again, the reminder is to keep them actionable clauses and then also to follow the formatting. And then you get down to here, and these are the signature lines. So you'll have passed by committee and passed by ASUM Senate. Those will always remain the same. And you'll have the date on when those passed committee and the Senate. And then ending in the year that the resolution is being debated. So this can change in the middle of an academic year, and it's always a weird transition between fall and spring semester because you have to change that. And when I was vice president, I totally forgot it. So make sure to remember to change this date. So if you're in the spring, obviously it's 2021. If you're in the 2020-2021 academic year, if you're in the fall, it's 2020. There's an underline, and then there's a comma in 2020. And then down here, you are the signature lines for the people. Typically, the chair of Relations and Affairs signs resolutions, but also all chairs can sign resolutions. It doesn't just have to be RNA. And so the format that goes is you have the signature line up top, and then you have the name of chair, so whatever the name of the person is. And then this is the most important thing, is putting the comma, and then below that, chair of the blank committee. It's not Relations and Affairs Committee chair, it's chair of the blank whatever committee or whatever board. It's kind of weird, but that's the format that is prescribed to us. So just be aware that that's kind of the format that you need to use. And then obviously the name of your vice president and chair of the Senate goes right here too. So that's pretty much the extent of formatting the resolution, with the exception of one thing, and I'll address that right now. So actually, let me go back to this. You can see right here, when we were on this resolution, you saw line numbers denoting what line each number, or what each number line was. Here, you can't do that. And unfortunately, you can't do that in Box or Google Docs. So when you download the resolution, you have to add it back into the resolution. So what you can do here is, I took this random document. It's actually the Montana Associated Students Constitution. And you can see it doesn't have any line numbers right now. So what you can do is you go to Layout, and you go to here, Line Numbers, and then you click Continuous. Now I'm not going to click Continuous because I still have to use this document later. But you click Continuous and it adds line numbers to every single line in the document. And that way, when you're going to amend the resolution during the meeting, it's easier to point out the specific point that you want to amend, instead of just like telling the secretary where to go, and it's just not working out. So line numbers are pretty crucial. Make sure to include them on resolutions. And another note for when you're sending resolutions in, make sure to send them in Word documents, as that's going to be the easiest way for committee chairs or the secretary to amend the resolution during the meeting. If you send it in a PDF, it's a nightmare to deal with. So that's basically the resolution format and kind of an overview of kind of how to write a resolution. My recommendation for you is, if you have an issue that you want to write a resolution about, just go for it and make sure to get advice from other people before you propose it. So that way it's the best product that the committee and the Senate sees that you're able to produce. So there's that. And then this document, which is also in your Senator Transition document, kind of describes the life of an ASUM resolution. So it's pretty cool to read through this and to kind of see how to introduce a resolution and potentially get it passed. It's not terribly difficult to get an ASUM resolution passed. Sometimes it takes time. One of my resolutions my sophomore year took a month to pass, but typically, it's about a week or 2 weeks to get a resolution passed in ASUM. So I'll start with the top line. The author, or anyone that's on the sponsor line, writes a resolution before Senate. And then the important thing is that they're responsible for contacting the parties that could be involved. And that's a very, very important thing. It's the way that your resolution is going to have an impact on UM or ASUM. If it's changing governing documents, you don't have to, but you should really contact the parties. If it's like taking a stance on, like something in housing, or something like you're taking a stance on faculty senate, the grading policy or whatnot, it's important to contact those relevant parties beforehand so they're aware, you get them on board, and then hopefully when the Senate passes the resolution, that they're on board with it and they just automatically put it into effect instead of being lagged behind. This has been a problem that's definitely occurred in the past. So if you do this, then you're really getting a step ahead on getting your changes implemented and actually having a tangible effect on the University of Montana. Then a senator or an executive proposes the resolution on a new business. And during the time when the senator or exec proposes the resolution, the author and the VP kind of negotiate which committee they want to send it to. Typically, the VP will always have a committee. If it's changing bylaws, it always goes to Relations and Affairs. That's actually prescribed to us in the ASUM bylaws currently. It might have changed if you're on Senate maybe like 5 years later. But that addendum to the bylaws could change. If it's fiscal policy change, it usually always goes to Board on Budget Finance. If it's a student group recognition change, Board on Members and Relations and Affairs, and then other stuff, it goes to relevant committees like sustainability, it goes to the Sustainability Board and not necessarily Relations and Affairs. So then the author sends a written resolution that was proposed to the VP no later than 20 or 42 hours after the start time, or after, yeah, the start time of the ASUM Senate meeting. Now, this is actually something that the Vice President has no control over, as it's prescribed to them in the ASUM House rules. So it has to be 42 hours after. My year, Senate meeting started at 6 p.m. It could be different for you. And so that meant that resolutions had to be into me by noon on Friday. The year before, Senate meeting started at 6:30 for me, so resolutions were due to the Vice President by 12:30 p.m. on Friday. So make sure that you communicate with your VP to find out the time that resolutions need to be submitted. If Senate meetings are still taking place on Wednesday when you're on Senate, and it's around the same time, it should be pretty easy to figure out. But the best thing that I would recommend to you is that if you have your resolution written, just send it in on Thursday so that the Vice President can get it to the committee chairs and everyone can prepare a little bit earlier instead of waiting until the last second to send it, and then the Vice President sends it to the committee chair late and it gets out to the committee late. So highly encourage you to send it the day after the Senate meeting. Then obviously, I kind of went over this, but the VP forwards the resolution to the committee chair. The resolution is viewed, debated, and amended in committee. As an author, you really should attend the committee meeting. If you can't, for whatever reason, that's not that big of a deal, but it would be helpful for voting members of that committee to kind of get an understanding of why you proposed the resolution, changes that you would be okay with, and then ultimately, hopefully, passing it on to the Senate. Parties that would be interested or affected can be invited to the committee meeting, but it's pretty uncommon, so don't necessarily worry about that. And then the bottom line that you'll see there is that the resolution could fail at this step. So the committee could choose to kill it, and that's like voting it down, or obviously postponing it indefinitely, and then it doesn't get to the Senate. Let's say the committee passes it. Good for you. So the chair will send the passed resolutions to the ASUM secretary and the ASUM vice president no later than 25 hours before the Senate meeting, which for me was 5 p.m. on Tuesday. And this is to ensure that the secretary has enough time to put the agenda together, to put all the resolutions and all of the items for the meeting onto the agenda and onto the website, and then they post it 24 hours in advance in abiding with Montana open public meeting laws. Then the resolution obviously is placed on the agenda. And then one thing that you would be encouraged is if you have parties that would be affected by the resolution, you should invite them to public comment to speak on the resolution. Senators can then ask them questions about what they think of the resolution. And then that can give senators and execs a better way to gauge your resolution and determine whether they want to vote for it or not, or if they want to amend it in any way, shape, or form. Then the resolution, as I said before, a resolution is placed under new business, and once it gets to that point in the meeting, it's debated there. You obviously get an authorship, and then there's debate, and it could be amended at that point. The resolution could also fail at this step by a number of ways, such as a no vote during the roll call vote, or a motion to postpone indefinitely. So then let's say it passes, which is really cool. You just pass a bill in Senate. Then the actions outlined in the resolution are taken. So if there's any amendments to ASUM governing documents, it's made by the secretary. If the resolution needs to be sent to anybody, the secretary sends it to people. If it's prescribing actions that the university should take, obviously the university can't take those, but ASUM will take those in the way that it advocates to the university administration, as well as the way that the Senate advocates to the university administration. And this is where the last part comes into play, because those actionable clauses that the university or other outside entities should take, but they're not required to take since it's an ASUM resolution, that means that that's where really the work starts. Again, is talking with them before, making the resolution, and then talking with them after to get those changes implemented that you think would be beneficial for the students in the University of Montana. So make sure to talk with those people, schedule meetings, and make sure that your changes are getting implemented so you can better students' lives. So that was basically an overview of the formatting of an ASUM resolution and the life of an ASUM resolution. Again, make sure to reach out to your VP if you have any questions about the formatting or about kind of this process in general. Some of this is prescribed by House rules, so chances are that if you're reading this now, or if you're listening to this now, it could change, like when to send the resolution to the vice president. But if it has changed, I'm sure the vice president will reach out to the Senate to inform them of the changes and correct me for being wrong. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure to tune in to more videos that I've made for this.